Hello there, good morning. It is Thursday, the 4th of June. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, your morning dose of European news and analysis, live here on Euronews. Coming up, Hungary is set to lift its 2-year-long veto on Ukraine's bid to join the European Union after the Hungarian Prime Minister Péter Magyar announced a deal with Kyiv on minority rights. The news comes as NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte holds a surprise visit in Kyiv and as EU leaders gather in Montenegro for talks on EU enlargement. We'll be live in Tivat. Plus, after talks in Washington, Israel and Lebanon have agreed to renew a fragile ceasefire. That's according to a joint US statement. Under the deal, Iran-backed Hezbollah would have to halt its attacks and remove operatives from the south. The announcement comes just hours after Kuwait International Airport suspended all commercial flights after Iranian drones caused severe damage. And bad news for Berlin. Despite lobbying hard, Germany has failed to secure a seat on the UN Security Council, with Portugal and Austria receiving more votes for the 2 Western European seats starting in 2027. The last time Germany was on the UN Security Council was back in 2020. But first, European and some Western Balkan leaders are gathering in Montenegro ahead of a high-level summit focused on expanding the European Union. Montenegro, the host, is also a front-runner here, hoping to join the bloc as soon as 2028. Now, while not officially on the agenda, Ukraine will also dominate the talks. For more, we can go straight to the coastal town of Tivat, where our Europe editor, Maria Tadeo, is reporting live for us. Maria, great to have you with us. Look, we've seen, though, many meetings like this in the past, with not a lot of deliverables. Will this time be different?
Well, good morning, Maeve. And indeed, because if you look at the history of accession when it comes to the EU Western Balkans, it's one of delays, disappointment and frustration. But the message that the European institutions will deliver and the message that the head of the European Council, Antonio Costa, will hammer down is that now there is real momentum because bringing these countries, the 6 partner countries, closer to the European political union through the EU is now a geopolitical imperative. It is also a need when it comes to the security infrastructure of Europe. Now, that is, as I say, the message that Antonio Costa, who will co-chair a dinner today, but also a summit tomorrow, will deliver. And he has been on a tour of the Western Balkans throughout this week. It is also no coincidence that this summit is happening in Montenegro because this is a country that is now clearly seen as the front runner. Of course, 28 by 28. The idea that there could be a new member state in the European Union by 2028. And I can tell you just anecdotally, Maeve, yesterday when we landed in this country at the airport, at dinner also, everyone knew and everyone was aware that this summit is happening. There have been many conversations that we had around the idea of joining, and it's pretty much taken as a given here. There is this aspiration to join this European Union, but of course we know that this region is diverse and it is also complex. It's not the same message for every of the participating countries, but the message, as I say, from the institutions will be there is now real momentum. It is an imperative. Reforms are still needed both ways, by the way, not just the Western Balkans, but also within the European Union to get this done. And of course, there has been many ideas floated. Now, thinking outside the box in many ways, still continuing to say that this is a merit-based process. It is based on heavy reforms, but also, as you know, multiple suggestions that perhaps you could look into memberships that go step by step, new countries that could join without the full rights, perhaps joining without a veto. The idea put forward by the German Chancellor, who will be here alongside the French president of association with the European Union. And the capitals, of course, also matter because they will have the final say. This has to be approved unanimously. But as I say, going into the summit, the message very much from the European institution is there is real momentum. Now is the time to push forward and move forward. There is now an imperative to bring these countries closer to the Union. They cannot stay stuck in limbo. But as I mentioned, this is a complex scenario, and this region is very diverse in its aspirations, but also the many challenges.
Indeed, Maria. And just while you're there have been some developments overnight. Péter Magyar, the Hungarian Prime Minister, announcing a deal on minorities between Hungary and Ukraine. Is Budapest about to lift its veto?
Well, Maeve, major news overnight, as you say, because the Hungarian Prime Minister Peter Magyar has announced what he claims to be is a comprehensive deal between the Ukrainians and the Hungarians when it comes to the linguistical rights. He's talking about the educational rights, the political and cultural rights of the Hungarian minority in Ukraine. He says that because Ukraine has now agreed to implement some of these changes legally, Hungary will be in a position to lift its veto now going on for more than 3 years for formal negotiations for Ukraine to join the bloc to finally begin. This is a politically charged issue for both Hungary and Ukraine. For the Hungarians, we should note for our European viewers, this is seen as a matter of protecting Hungarians in Ukraine. For the Hungarian Prime Minister, it was very much about a domestic message that he is defending the rights of the ethnic Hungarians in Ukraine. And that was very much what Peter Magyar put out in a social media post yesterday, claiming that he has accomplished now more in 3 weeks than Viktor Orban ever did in 10 years. That referring to this deal with the Ukrainians, but also the package that was agreed with the European institutions last week, unblocking more than 60 billion euros in funding for the country. This also matters because it will have a knock-on effect on Moldova. Moldova got stuck in this limbo between Hungary and Ukraine. They will now push through too, and European sources telling Euronews last night that this is a win-win for everyone. It will be a win for Hungary. It will be a win for Ukraine. They speak of not just concessions on behalf of the Ukrainians, and they also say that this would point to a return of unanimity of 27 and the drop of constant vetoes by Hungary. The summit that will be taking place in mid-June is now being perceived and portrayed as a celebration of what European sources told us will reflect of a new European unity.
And just briefly, Maria, if I may, how has Ukraine reacted?
Well, look, Maeve, that is a fundamental question because at this hour, at this point, we do not know what is in this deal. We have not heard from the Ukrainian president himself, Volodymyr Zelensky, but we did hear just this morning over the past 30 minutes from the Ukrainian foreign minister who is speaking of gratitude when it comes to the European Union, but also signaling a new chapter in relations when it comes to Hungary. The prime minister of Ukraine also saying that this puts the country now one step closer to joining the European Union. But we should make one thing very clear, and this is extremely important, of course, for our viewers in Euronews this morning. This does not signal and does not mean that Ukraine will join overnight or that the path to membership will be easy. In fact, it will be very difficult, certainly in the context of the war with Russia and this potential peace settlement that may come up, but also because the Hungarians, they are indicating they will lift this veto, and that is significant. But Peter Magyar also took a hardline yesterday saying that he does not believe and does not support an accelerated membership and fast track for Ukraine. We know that is a position that many of the big member states also share, but he also indicated even if Ukraine manages to complete this very difficult and at times tortuous path towards reform, he will put this matter to a referendum before the Hungarian people.
OK, Maria Tadeo, putting it all in context for us there live from Montenegro. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll be back again tomorrow with Maria, with her exclusive interview with the EU Council President, Antonio Costa. But Ukraine, staying in Ukraine, Russia has fired a massive drone and missile attack towards the country, killing 22 people this Wednesday. It comes in response to Ukraine targeting the city of St. Petersburg as President Putin was hosting his annual economic forum, a bit like the Russian Davos. Ukrainian drones also struck energy and military sites in the Russian port city. This all as the NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte was making his surprise trip to Kyiv. For more on all of this, I'm joined here on set by our Ukraine correspondent, that is, of course, Sasha Bakalina. Good morning, Sasha. Just tell us, what was the purpose of Mark Rutte's surprise visit?
First and foremost, to discuss the insufficient supplies of anti-ballistic air defense for Ukraine. Now, Russia knows very well that this indeed is one of those very rare gaps in Ukraine's air defense, because this is where Ukraine, of course, relies on the US. Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia has the capacity to produce 120 ballistic missiles per month. Now, just to compare, the US producers have the capacity to make 65 PAC-3 missiles for Patriot systems. This is just half of what Russia can actually produce and launch at Ukraine. And this, of course, causes a very long waiting time for anybody applying for those missiles. Let's take a listen to what Volodymyr Zelensky had to say.
The waiting list for PAC-2, PAC-3, and certainly for the Patriot systems is measured in years. And so, to be honest, we wouldn't be able to receive this new delivery until around 2030. That didn't sit well with me, and it didn't sit well with our team. We discussed what alternatives we could find. This involves an agreement with certain countries to swap places in the queue where one country could give us its spot and we could take that spot and receive the systems earlier.
Given Kyiv's response and also Kyiv's development of homemade weapons, Zelensky also confirmed that Kyiv is once again asking the US to provide Ukraine with the license to produce those anti-ballistic defense missiles, Maeve.
And Sasha, Mark Rutte's visit came yesterday just as Ukrainian forces were striking the oil refinery in St. Petersburg, just as delegates were arriving for Vladimir Putin's economic forum.
Yeah, indeed. That was a clear demonstration also of Ukraine's long-range striking capabilities, because that oil terminal is over 1,000 kilometers away from Ukraine's border, and Ukraine specifically said that Volodymyr Zelensky insisted that this strike is justified also because Kyiv is targeting military and energy, specifically oil facilities. But also this proves big progress. This is something that was recognized by the Secretary General of NATO. Let's take a listen.
Ukraine is now so successful that Putin is only able to organize a 9th of May parade with an official presidential decree by this president. So this is basically how far you got. And I think for 2 hours you allowed him to do it, and it then ended in 1 hour 55 minutes. So he didn't take a risk.
Mark Rutte there speaking from Kyiv, and before that, of course, our Sasha Vakalina. Thank you so much for that update. But now, moving on, after another round of negotiations, Israel and Lebanon have agreed to implement a ceasefire contingent on a cessation of Hezbollah fire and the removal of Hezbollah operatives from southern Lebanon. It comes as Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says the US-Israel war with Iran will only end when it also ends in Lebanon. For The View from Beirut, we're joined now by Ghassan Salami, a huge academic and political figure in Lebanon, currently serving as the Minister of Culture. Good morning, Minister. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning. So first question, the obvious one, what is your reaction to this agreement? Is it a genuine breakthrough or just another temporary pause in the fighting?
We hope it's genuine. We had a ceasefire already on April the 16th that was not implemented. So now the proof of the genuine nature of this new agreement is in its implementation. And therefore, the agreement is still fresh, a few hours old. So it's probably too early to decide how serious it is, but we certainly take it seriously.
And that's the problem. The previous ceasefire did not work, with many calling it just an armed truce.
It was not even a truce. I mean, hundreds of people have been killed during the 6 weeks, these 6 past weeks after the announcement of the latest or penultimate ceasefire agreement. This new one has a direct commitment by the mediator, that is the United States, and it has a number of points that need to be implemented on the ground. We need also to have the two governments implementing it, each on his side. We will be trying to implement our side of the agreement, and we hope that on the other side, where we hear some ministers in the Israeli cabinet already refusing the agreement, which is not very helpful, and we need also to have a common interpretation of the various paragraphs in the agreement. And I hope that some of the sort of far-fetched interpretations I heard this morning from the Israeli Prime Minister and the Minister of Defense are only for public consumption, not their real position.
And of course, there's tension, isn't there, between President Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, and then Lebanon. You're stuck right in the middle.
We are, but without American pressure, we were not expecting the Israeli government to move forward towards such agreement. So it is under American sustained pressure that we can expect a real implementation this time.
And will Hezbollah comply with the terms, do you think?
They have been silent so far, but we expect them to express their position during the day. Because it's true that the agreement calls for ceasefire on both sides and for the withdrawal of Hezbollah fighters from south of the Litani. We are expecting their reaction during the day.
And just describe the damage done so far by Israel. The last time we spoke here on Europe Today, you described it as an incursion.
That's how they put it. But this incursion has been bloody. And as Minister of Culture, I should say that it also destroyed 60 villages entirely, flattened out, and a number of very important heritage positions have been also hit, including the Chateau de Beaufort, to which Lebanese are very attached, not to mention the Shama position, which is a very important religious position in South Lebanon. So we hope that this time implementation will be serious. We are going to implement the government side of the agreement. We hope that we have a clear answer from Hezbollah during the day, and we hope that the Israelis don't overinterpret what's in it in a way that becomes unacceptable to us.
OK, Minister Ghassan Salame, thank you so much for joining us here this morning on Europe Today Live on Euronews. But now, moving on, Berlin is licking its wounds after failing to secure a rotating spot on the UN Security Council. For more on this big blow for Berlin, we're joined by our very own Stefan Krobe, who, despite his German accent, or his American accent, excuse me, is actually German. You've got a wonderfully fluent English accent. Stefan, just tell us, you are German, as I said. How are Germans reacting to this news?
I have to admit, Maeve, for Germany, this one hurts, right? Germany failing to win a seat on the Security Council is not just an obscure diplomatic blow. For Germans, it feels like something bigger. It's a reality check. For years, Germans have told themselves that the country is one of the world's indispensable nations. It's Europe's economic engine. It's a champion of international cooperation, a country others look to for leadership. Yet when the votes were counted at the UN, the world looked elsewhere. And perhaps Germans shouldn't be surprised. For too long, Germany assumed that its economic power would automatically translate into political influence. Germans believed that because they paid the bills, because they supported international institutions, and because they praised multilateralism, other countries would naturally back them. Yet clearly, many do not. So the uncomfortable truth is that Germany's international standing in the world may not be what Germans think it is. Of course, Germany remains a powerful country. One vote at the UN will not change that. But symbols matter in diplomacy. And this symbol, Maeve, was painful. It
was painful. And also for Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor.
Well, look, for Friedrich Merz, the vote was absolutely embarrassing. Merz has made rebuilding Germany's international standing a central theme of his chancellorship. After years of criticism that Germany is hesitant, inward-looking, he has presented himself as a leader willing to put Germany at the center of world affairs. Now, losing such an important international vote is exactly that kind of setback opponents can point to as evidence that his strategy is not delivering any results. So this failure at the UN only further weakens his domestic position in Berlin, and which is already fragile and might fuel attempts within his own Christian Democratic Party, Maeve, to get rid of him.
OK, Stefan Krobe, thank you so much for that update there. And thank you so much for tuning into us this morning on Europe Today. Any questions or comments or points on any of the stories we're covering, you can contact the team here at Europe Today at euronews.com. That is our email address. You can also listen to Europe Today as a podcast or read it as a newsletter. Thanks so much for tuning in. Stay with us here on Euronews.